Good Monday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, walloped. A winter wake-up call for millions of people. This morning, weather alerts are in effect for much of the East Coast as a massive storm system slams the region with heavy snow, freezing rain, and dangerous winds. We have team coverage with what you need to know for the morning commute, plus where this storm is heading next. 11 hours of terror. Disturbing new information this morning about that hostage situation turned deadly standoff at a Texas synagogue. 4 people are safe, the sole suspect dead, and an FBI investigation now underway.
I wanted to make sure we got the word out to synagogues and places of worship that we're not going to tolerate this. This was an act of terror. This was an act of terror.
What we're learning from authorities, including more on the federal prisoner the suspect demanded to be released. Family legacy, a renewed push to protect voting rights on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day, as the family of the civil rights icon rallies for the passage of new voting rights legislation. More on the effort to honor King's memory, plus the latest on the pair of bills facing hurdles in the Senate. And survival mode, movie theaters on a roller coaster during these 2 years of the pandemic, but a string of new hit films could help save the silver screen. We'll give you a sneak peek at what industry experts hope will get more people going back to the movies this year. And of course, one of the things that might have got many of you back was Spider-Man, since everybody seems to have seen that.
And this weekend, Scream.
Yes, Scream.
You love
I know.
horror.
I do like horror, but I don't know. I haven't gone to a theater yet, so we'll see. All right, we begin this morning with news right outside your window. If you're on the East Coast like we are, another major winter storm, this one impacting millions.
The system dropped several inches of snow as far south as Georgia and South Carolina. Blizzard-like conditions in some areas caused dangerous conditions for drivers yesterday. This was the scene overnight just north of New York City as the weather created treacherous road conditions for drivers there. Storms also brought freezing rain and heavy winds to the southeast, creating icy conditions there. Frozen power lines are leaving thousands in the dark this morning. The weather is also taking a toll on air travel. Yesterday, more than 3,000 flights were canceled. This morning, already more than 1,200 as the storm makes its way up the East Coast.
Yeah, I knew it was coming, but, you know, I had to get in touch with my folks and whatnot. And, you know, try to, you know, hope for the best and see if, you know, a better flight opened up while I was here, you know, and be on my way to Florida. But, you know, unfortunately, you know, didn't, you know, plan out like that. You know, it's just the way things go, I guess.
We've got team coverage following all angles of the winter storm. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman is tracking where the snow is heading next. NBC News correspondent Kathy Park is in Charlotte with the latest on the aftermath from the storm. But let's begin in Gaithersburg, Maryland. That's just outside of Washington, D.C. And WRC reporter Juliana Valencia. Juliana, good morning. Tell us, what are the conditions like where you are this morning?
Hey there, good morning, Joe and Savannah. Good to be with you guys again. Yeah, Gaithersburg, it's about 40 minutes. Many people who work in D.C., they live out here, and we've had a mix of conditions this morning. I'll tell you, about 5:15, we got a fresh layer of light, fluffy snow that was coming down. It added to what was left from last night. About 5:30 p.m., it started hitting really hard, but the roads, if you take a look out here, they were pre-treated, so even maybe about 30 minutes ago, there was a thin layer of snow. That's gone. People are just dealing with those wet conditions. And the big thing for later this morning, guys, it's going to be the wind. It is going to feel cold out here later today. But right now we have a bit of a reprieve. The light flurries stopped about maybe 30 minutes ago.
Lots to deal with. A reminder to all drivers to stay safe out there. Juliana, thank you so much.
Now, while millions in the Northeast feel the effects of the storm this morning down south, they're waking up with no power after the winter weather pummeled the region with heavy winds and freezing rain. NBC News correspondent Kathy Park is with us, as you just saw, from Charlotte, North Carolina. Hi, Kathy. Good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning to you from a very chilly Charlotte. At last check, it's about 30 degrees out here. When you factor in wind chill, it feels like 21 degrees. Yeah, so the storm, long gone. It got out of here late last night, but we're waking up to this, kind of this wintry mix, and anything that melted, that thawed during the overnight hours froze over. Meanwhile, this morning, we are tracking some serious wrecks on the interstate and lots of cancellations at the airport.
A dangerous mix of snow, sleet, and freezing rain crippling the Carolinas. Heavy snow burying Greenville, a wintry mess in Charlotte.
It's a lot slicker than I thought it would be.
And treacherous travel in Raleigh.
The ice, you can't see it, and when you do, it's too late. So, you know, again, it's not worth the risk.
Spinouts piling up on the interstate.
Our State Highway Patrol advises staying off the roads in most parts of the state on Sunday and Monday if you can.
At Charlotte's airport, nearly all flights grounded. The high-impact storm knocking out power to tens of thousands in the southeast. Officials warning that 750,000 customers in North and South Carolina could see outages extend for days if the icing gets worse.
We've moved in more than 11,000 resources. They're staged strategically throughout the Carolinas, awaiting those impacts to see where those outages occur and where they need to begin responding.
Is it essentially going to be nonstop for your cruise today?
It is nonstop. It's been nonstop, I think, all week.
At least 4 governors declaring states of emergency. Overnight, near whiteout conditions in Arkansas to steady snow in Georgia. Stores hit hard with supply chain issues are struggling to keep up with storm demands.
Unfortunately, with the supply chain being like it is, we went to order in and there was nothing there.
Extreme weather also striking southwest Florida. A reported EF2 tornado leaving behind a path of destruction, destroying dozens of mobile homes across 3 communities near Fort Myers.
This happened so fast, it was just unbelievable. This really came hard and it came fast.
And the storm isn't slowing down. Up next, the Northeast.
And Duke Energy, the major power company here in the Carolinas, reported that at the peak of this winter storm, they were tracking close to 100,000 power outages. This morning, that number is down to 45,000. And with more than 11,000 workers on deck, they actually hope to have most of the power restored by today. Savannah?
All right, Kathy Park, thank you so much.
All that sets us up for a check on your morning news now. Weather.
NBC meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us as we continue to track this major storm. Hey, Michelle, good to see you.
Good morning. Good to see you guys. Yeah, we've been tracking this storm since last Thursday. We tracked it all weekend long, and we continue to track it today. And we will track it till tomorrow morning before it finally makes its way into Canada. So it brought all types of weather, heavy snow, heavy rain, even severe weather in Florida yesterday. Did you see some of these images where we saw those strong winds move on shore? It was on the west coast of Florida. It started out as waterspouts, and then these storms moved on shore, just knocking over structures. There was an RV park where a lot of houses were damaged, over 20 houses, and we have 4 confirmed tornadoes in Florida. We're going to have survey teams out today looking for more, but it was a wild weather day yesterday in Florida. Today we are looking at the cold side of the storm, so winter weather alerts all up and down the coast in terms of New England down to the Carolinas still. As Kathy mentioned, it is cold in Charlotte, and we're looking at those frozen grounds there, but it's to the north where we're looking at some heavy rain. So 51 million people impacted. Where you see that pink, that's your winter storm warning. This is what it looks like on radar. You can see the blue, that's your snow. The darker blue is your heavy snow. So some spots could see almost 2 feet of snow along the Great Lakes. So some spots seeing quite a bit of snow, while others were seeing quite a bit of rain. And we're seeing heavy rain. I think the biggest problems this morning will be the winds. We're going to see gusty winds and persistent winds. So we could see some power outages in the Northeast, along with that heavy rain. That could lead to coastal flooding. So as we go throughout time here, we're going to see that area of low pressure move to the north and east, 65-mile-per-hour winds with that likely coastal flooding. I'll show you that map in just a minute. And then finally, it's going to pull out of here later on tonight and affect Canada by early tomorrow morning. So we still have some time to get through here, too. In terms of your snowfall forecast, again, localized amounts over a foot of snow. Where you see the pink, that's your heaviest amount of snow. So Rochester down to Buffalo, along the Appalachians once ago, again, the central Appalachians. And then parts of New England could see some heavy snow as well. Winds, that's going to be the problem today. We're going to see some power outages in the Northeast as well as the Carolinas, like Kathy had mentioned. Winds gusting up to 65 miles per hour. A high wind warning where you see the purple along the coast along Maine, also the coast of Massachusetts, into Rhode Island, and the coast of, I couldn't even think of the state, Connecticut, that's it. Power outages here where you see the yellow, that's your isolated, and then we're seeing some scattered along the New England coast. But again, that's going to be a problem as we go throughout today. Now, this is a big one over the next several hours. 21 million people impacted where we could see some coastal flooding. It's a combination of the winds that I just talked about, in addition to the full moon and also high tides. So we're going to see 2 to 4 feet of inundation. And what that means, guys, is we're going to see that water is going to move over dry land. So if you are parked near waterways, if your house is near a waterway, you want to take heed of any warnings, move your car back, get to higher ground, because we're looking at pretty high levels when you talk about 4 feet.
Yeah, wow.
Good morning. Keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Michelle. We'll see you in a bit.
Yeah.
We're learning more about the gunman who held 4 people hostage at a Texas synagogue for 11 hours on Saturday. In the end, all 4 hostages were released safely. The hostage taker died after law enforcement moved in. The FBI has identified the suspect as Malik Faisal Akram, a 44-year-old British citizen. He entered the U.S. legally at New York's JFK Airport around New Year's Day. The investigation into this case is now stretching across the globe. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock joins us from Colleyville, Texas, with the latest. Sam, good morning to you. So what are we learning about this suspect and his possible motives for all of this?
Joe, good morning. Faisal Akram, we know, was 44 years old. He was a British citizen. He belonged to a mosque in Lancashire, England. And we are now learning more in the last 24 hours, Joe, from his brother. Sky News obtained a statement which described the fact that the brother believes he was suffering from some mental health issues. Did that play a role in what happened in this congregation behind me about a day and a half ago? That is not clear right now, but the brother also said he didn't believe that Akram was capable of taking human lives. Now, thankfully, those 4 hostages did leave safely, miraculously. The FBI is now commenting on possible motivations to your question, specifically as it pertains to Aafia Siddiqui. Here's where this gets interesting. Let me read you specifically from the FBI statement overnight. They say, quote, during the negotiations with law enforcement, the hostage taker, Malik Faisal Akram, spoke repeatedly about a convicted terrorist who is serving an 86-year prison sentence in the United States on terrorism charges. This is a terrorism-related matter in which the Jewish community was targeted and is being investigated by the Joint Terrorism Task Force. The reason this is kind of a pivot, Joe, is because in the FBI's initial comments after this all happened, they said that the Jewish community really was not being targeted. It seemed to be singularly focused on Siddiqui, which is a prisoner. She is a prisoner who was convicted back in 2010 of trying to kill U.S. security personnel, and who also said that she blames Israel for her outcome after she was convicted. That's the sequencing of events. Then the president yesterday came out and commented on what's going on here in a bizarre set of circumstances. Here's what he said.
Allegedly, I don't have all the facts, nor the Attorney General, but allegedly the assertion was he got the weapons on the street. He purchased them when he landed. And it turns out there apparently were no bombs that we know of. That, you know, he said that there were bombs he had as well. But he apparently he spent the first night in a homeless shelter. I don't have all the detail yet, so I'm reluctant to go into much more detail. But and allegedly he purchased it on the street.
Joe, the comment about no bombs or explosives is notable as well, because so far the FBI hasn't provided details on that aspect of things, as well as in addition to the fact that there's still a mystery hanging over what exactly happened to end this entire conflict. We know there was a breach of the synagogue, but was Mr. Akram armed? Were there explosives that were detonated? These remain open-ended questions, Joe.
Sam, there are also developments overseas. British police say they've detained 2 teenagers who NBC has confirmed are Akram's sons. What can you tell us about that?
Right. So they were detained yesterday for questioning. Now, that does not mean, Joe, that they were necessarily involved in what happened, but they were taken. And we also know that they were in contact with Akram during this entire ordeal, which also lines up, Joe, with what I was hearing from folks who had been watching what was unfolding on Zoom. They told me that their family members of Akram were trying to reach him during all of this. So the FBI's acknowledgement that there was communication and also that they are speaking with his sons does line up with that accounting.
And Sam, none of the hostages was harmed in the attack, but in a statement, a rabbi who was among the hostages credited active shooter training they'd done in the past for their survival. So what do we know about what was happening inside the synagogue during the stand-up, and do we know much about how it ended?
This is pretty incredible. The Secure Community Network is a nonprofit group, Joe, that works with not just congregations and temples, synagogues, but churches and mosques throughout the country, hundreds of them, to figure out how to safeguard their facilities and also what to do in the event of an active shooter. They were here on August 22nd, only a couple of months ago, speaking with the rabbi and preparing the congregation for an event just like this. Now, was that material to what happened over the weekend? That's not clear. I did speak with a top national security advisor. He says that the rabbi had credited some of their training for helping during the process. I also spoke with a woman who lives right around this area who said that she believes the calming presence of Rabbi Charlie is likely what allowed this to end safely, because once they were trained for active shooters, but not for what's supposed to happen if they're held hostage. And somehow, over 10 and 11 hours, it ended peacefully. Joe?
It's hard to hear we even need this training, but it is good to know that the training did make a difference here. Sam, thanks so much for your reporting. Appreciate it.
Now, as Sam mentioned, during this 11-hour standoff, the gunman repeatedly demanded the release of Aafia Siddiqui, a Pakistani woman serving an 86-year prison sentence for attempting to kill American soldiers. Let's bring in NBC News national security correspondent Ken Delaney with more on this. Hey, Ken, good morning. So who is this woman, and tell us, what is she convicted of doing?
Good morning, Savannah. She is one of the most enigmatic and interesting figures in the war on terror. She's been variously known as Lady Al-Qaeda. She was once called the most wanted woman in the world. She's serving an 86-year prison sentence in that Fort Worth Medical Center near the site of this incident after being convicted on charges of trying to kill American soldiers when she was captured in Afghanistan in 2008. So let's backtrack. She came from a prominent Pakistani family. She was educated in the United States, degree in biology from MIT, PhD in neuroscience from Brandeis, and then, according to U.S. law enforcement officials, became radicalized after 9/11 and disappeared for a while and was named as a terrorist by U.S. and Afghani authorities. And when the Afghans captured her, they say she had plans for a mass casualty attack in New York City. And she was brought into a room, according to the court records, not handcuffed. U.S. law enforcement and military officers came in the room. Again, this is according to the trial and the court records. And they say she grabbed a gun, tried to fire at them, tried to kill them, and thus was convicted of attempted murder and is serving this 86-year sentence. But for whatever reason, she has been embraced by the terrorist movement, and on various occasions they have tried to leverage her release. In one case, when ISIS captured the journalist James Foley, they offered to release him in exchange for her. In another case, Bo Bergdahl. So she has been at the center of attempts to get her released for a very long time.
And Ken, I know there's some controversy surrounding this conviction from back in 2010, excuse me. So quickly tell us, what were these movements in Pakistan and elsewhere arguing? What were they saying had gone wrong here?
Yeah, and I should say, by the way, that her lawyer says that she had nothing to do with this incident and decries it. But yes, her conviction has long been protested in Pakistan, even by the Pakistani government. And you know, there was a protest as recently as October in New York City in front of the Pakistani consulate. The argument is that her conviction was unjust, that she may have been the subject of torture, that somehow the Americans acted improperly. Again, this case went through the federal courts. Those allegations were not deemed founded at the time, but for whatever reason, she's been, you know, the Pakistani government, the Pakistani people view her as a symbol of American overreach, Savannah.
All right, Ken Delaney, thank you so much.
Now to the latest on the pandemic. As Omicron cases sweep the country, the U.S. Surgeon General is warning we have not reached the peak yet. That's despite the high number of cases all across the country right now. The next few weeks could be very challenging in many parts of the country, especially those places where vaccination rates are lower. Joining us now, NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. So, Dr. Patel, let's talk about this. Still weeks to go, potentially, before this latest wave peaks in the U.S. So what can we expect in the next few weeks, and will hospitals be able to withstand this rising surge?
Yeah, Joe, approximately half the hospitals in the country are at or near capacity. So this is not a good sign, as we have much of the country that still needs to get through their Omicron peak. It does follow previous patterns, Joe. So we do see Northeast, for example, impacted earliest, and then some of the coastal cities. But by and large, rural America, the Midwest, parts of the South, and even the Pacific Northwest has yet to see their peaks. And again, that next couple of weeks will be critical, as well as weeks after, where hospitalizations tend to lag 2 to 3 weeks.
Now, there seems to be a little bit of good news. Cities like Chicago, Washington, New York are seeing hospitalizations plateau and a slight drop in the number of daily cases. Of course, these were the cities hit early. They have high vaccination rates. But is there reason for optimism?
There is reason for optimism. And as you mentioned, these cities have had sustained decreases, not just one-day decreases, which is good news. But that is, again, kind of something that we saw earlier, as you say, urban areas, higher vaccinated populations. And it's not just the high vaccination rates. Remember, these are also cities that happen to put in pretty severe kind of mitigation measures, everything from vaccine requirements in Washington, D.C. to enter into businesses, all the way to some indoor capacity restrictions that we saw in Chicago and other areas.
And before we let you go, Dr. Patel, we do have a viewer question this morning. Tim from San Marcos, California writes, with new recommendations to use the more expensive N95 face mask, what steps could people take to allow repeated use of the mask? That's a great question.
Yeah.
So are these one-time use only, or can we reuse them? If so, how do you do that safely?
I love these viewer questions because they're what we're all thinking. So the best way to reuse a mask, and you can use it up to about 4 days if you do this, put it in a paper bag. You really want to prevent those elastic bands from getting overstretched. So don't hang them on a coat rack. I used to do that, and you can see these things getting weighed down. But take them in a paper bag and make sure if there's any dirt or dust off of it, just dust it off. Put it in a paper bag and let it be kind of the storage area. Have a bunch of these paper baggies and rotate them out. Not 4 days in a row, but if you've got 2 or 3 masks, rotate them out. That'll give you at least 4 to 5 days of usage.
Good advice there. Dr. Kavita Patel, thank you so much. She likes these questions. So do we. So if you have one for us and our doctors, let us know. You can ask us about the variant, the vaccines, or like we heard there, the masks. Our doctors are ready to answer those questions. Just email us at morningnewsnow@nbcuni.com with your questions. And also let us know if you want to stay anonymous.
Now, for many, this school year is proving to be just as stressful as the last, with some districts going remote or canceling classes altogether. But some school systems have managed to navigate this latest surge and are even planning for the next one. NBC News correspondent Rahima Ellis has this story.
We have to start thinking of COVID as a constant.
It's an unsettling thought.
Is allowing us the opportunity to really innovate.
But strategic planner Andrew Smith says school districts need to face the harsh reality.
We are in probably one of the most disruptive periods of time for public education that America has ever seen. Now is the time to do things differently.
Smith's job is to do just that for the roughly 18,000 students in the Rowan-Salisbury School District in North Carolina, making plans, a lot of them, for what could happen next.
You've got scenario 1 all the way down to scenario 13 here.
Yes.
Any questions about that?
A mixture of in-person and remote learning, an iPad for every student, and staff focused on emotional support for students, all measures helping to keep the district's school doors open, even amid the current Omicron wave. The superintendent says they're taking a long view of educating in a pandemic.
And we've got to figure out how we respond to problems that we don't even know about yet.
Under federal relief bills, Congress allocated $190 billion for schools to respond to the pandemic. The Department of Education says much of that money has gone towards school climate systems and hiring mental health professionals. In Salisbury, the district received about $70 million over a 3-year period and is using funds for smaller classes, enhanced ventilation systems, more nurses, and Wi-Fi hotspots throughout the community. Smith says he looked to the business sector for ideas.
If Disney World was going to bring back customers into their parks, they were going to do it in a way that was likely very safe.
It's commonplace now, but back in March of 2020, these safety protocols, like social distancing, didn't exist, and educators were scrambling.
We were paralyzed to know what to do next. The guidance was changing constantly, and so we needed a way to move forward and think ahead.
You've got more than 25 desks here, but only 10 students will fill this room.
That's correct.
The district has seen few outbreaks recently. These proactive measures provide stability to students like senior Rachel McCullough.
It shows me that this district cares about not only the students' learning or academics, but their safety as well.
A district that plans to keep learning about how best to teach. Rahima Ellis, NBC News, Salisbury, North Carolina.
Coming up, the Biden presidency 1 year later. When we return here on Morning News Now, we'll look back at the many challenges President Biden has faced during his first year in office, plus what's ahead for him in the year to come.
Also, the latest on the situation in Tonga after a volcanic eruption so powerful it triggered tsunami warnings here in the U.S. after the break.
This week marks 1 year since President Biden was sworn into office at a scaled-down ceremony just 2 weeks after the country witnessed the insurrection. But the aftermath from that attack on the Capitol was not the only crisis President Biden had to face at the start of his term. The U.S. was in the middle of a COVID surge. The vaccine rollout was in its very early stages, and millions were still out of work as the pandemic raged on.
NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba looks back at the Biden agenda in 2021 and what lays ahead for the president in 2022.
President Biden is ending his first year in office, facing many of the same challenges he was elected to tackle.
We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities.
An uneven economic recovery with soaring inflation, despite record job growth and low unemployment rates.
We have more work to do, and we're doing it.
As the country still battles the coronavirus pandemic, and much of the president's domestic agenda is stalled in a polarized Congress.
I said it's going to take me a year to deliver.
For any commander-in-chief, the first 12 months are full of campaign promises delivered and deferred.
You have to look at a president in terms of degree of difficulty. And if you think of the number of things that Joe Biden has had to deal with, he's had to make as consequential decisions as almost any president of the last 50 years.
Among the Biden administration's accomplishments so far,
go get vaccinated, America.
Launching a massive campaign to get Americans their shots, though 20% still haven't received a first dose. Passing a nearly $2 trillion COVID relief bill, rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement after the previous administration pulled the U.S. out of it, and signing into law a $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill.
America's moving again, and your life is going to change for the better.
But still unfinished, the president's signature Build Back Better Act, a huge social spending and climate plan with no clear path forward after members of his own party opposed its size and scope, as well as any police reform, comprehensive immigration, gun safety, or voting rights legislation.
I hope we can get this done, but I'm not sure.
All as the Omicron variant revealed shortfalls in testing and a national vaccine mandate for private businesses was blocked by the Supreme Court.
I know we're all frustrated as we enter this new year.
Starting 2022 with plenty of problems at home, while also confronting issues abroad, including tense talks with Russia and China.
Presidents love to come into office and say, this is the way I'm going to spend my first year, and this is what I'm going to ask Congress for in my second year. It never happens that way, and one reason for that is foreign policy.
Last summer, the president vowed to end the 20-year war in Afghanistan, fulfilling a key campaign pledge.
We'll do it responsibly, deliberately, and safely,
but severely underestimating how quickly the Taliban would take control, resulting in a chaotic and deadly evacuation.
I do not regret my decision.
Moving into a new year of difficult choices, only made more complicated by the looming midterm elections.
Anything he wants, he'd better get right now, because not likely to happen during a fall campaign, and really not likely to happen if the Democrats lose control of the House and Senate.
All right, our thanks to Monica Alba for that report.
And as Monica mentioned, with the midterm elections getting closer, Republicans are picking some new battles to run on. For South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, it's targeting transgender kids. The governor released an ad on national primetime TV promoting a bill she introduced last month to prevent trans girls from playing on any female sports teams at school. NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett has details.
In South Dakota, only girls play girls' sports. Why? Because of Governor Kristi Noem's leadership.
South Dakota's Republican governor in a new national ad betting on her 2022 re-election campaign, targeting transgender athletes and promoting a bill banning trans girls from playing sports in school.
Now, Governor Noem has a bill that will give South Dakota the strongest law in the nation protecting female sports.
It's an about-face for the incumbent governor. Back in March, she vetoed a similar bill that would have limited trans girls and women from competing in female sports leagues. She's running on the idea of less government, more freedom, according to her website. and joins a group of conservative Republican leaders who oppose trans rights.
Athletic teams or sports that are designated for females are open to females, and we're going to go based off biology, not based off ideology.
We all know what an absolute advantage boys would have playing against girls.
In 2021, 35 bills were filed in state legislatures to exclude transgender youth from competing in athletics. Plus, 7 more bills already introduced this year, working to limit trans and non-binary youth rights. 9 states enacted those laws, while South Dakota's was done by executive order. In an email to NBC News, a Republican South Dakota state representative supported Noem, writing, "It is unfortunate that we see this as removing the rights of any people. If competitive sports were made to be fair, there is a place for everyone to compete with the biology they were born with." The ACLU, though, sees a detrimental impact.
Understanding the impact that will have on transgender kids and the people who love them is honestly, it's devastating. Even if these bills don't pass, it still has a huge effect on trans kids. To know that their state representatives, they're not supporting them, they're instead attacking them.
Jaya Nagarajan Swenson, a non-binary student athlete on their school's rowing team and who has been closely following this legislation around the country, says they would be ready to leave their sport over what they call a polarizing issue.
When you see something like this happen, how does it make you feel?
Joining athletics was a really big part of my life, and I don't know if I would have done it if I had been seeing all of this. Like, seeing something that so clearly says, oh, like, you're not really welcome here, but we're also not really going to talk about it. And it's going to be all of this, like, these veiled sort of threats against you as a person. It makes it so easy to just get really dangerous into this, like, far wave of transphobia.
Our thanks to Maura Barrett for that report.
Let's now take a look at what is making news around the world this morning.
NBC's Alia Ruzi joins us from Tehran. Ali, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah, Joe. Well, a powerful volcanic eruption in Tonga has covered the island in ash and triggered a tsunami so powerful that it rocked ocean waters halfway across the world. So far, no casualties in Tonga, which has a population of just over 100,000, have been confirmed, but information out of Tonga has been almost impossible to gather since the eruption, in large part because the undersea communication cables, which is key to Tonga's communication network, has been knocked out. China's birth rate has dropped to record lows, prompting the government to encourage people to have more children after years of doing the opposite. But in a sign of the times, many couples don't want to have more children because of the high cost of urban living. And a couple in India will be hosting their wedding in metaverse. They'll be holding their reception digitally. After the ceremony, they'll switch to their laptops to enter a virtual venue for their Hogwarts-themed reception, attended by friends and family from all over the world. And those are your headlines, guys.
Well, that sounds COVID safe. All right.
Yeah, very.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you. All right, now it's been just over a week since Bob Saget's sudden death, and now the man so many considered America's dad has been laid to rest. Friends and family gathered in Los Angeles over the weekend for the funeral, and some of Saget's closest friends served as pallbearers, including some of his Full House co-stars. Saget's wife paid tribute to her husband on Instagram, saying she'll vow to keep spreading his message of love and laughter. Saget died last Sunday at the age of 65.
Coming up, a renewed sense of urgency on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Up next, the message from the family of the civil rights icon as the Senate battles over 2 bills meant to extend voter protections. You're watching Morning News Now. Welcome back. It turns out the rich have gotten even richer during the pandemic. The world's 10 richest billionaires, get this, have now doubled their wealth since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, according to a new report from the anti-poverty charity Oxfam. The fortunes of billionaires such as Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Warren Buffett skyrocketed to $1.5 trillion. At a rate of $15,000 per second, if you can believe that. The report is the latest piece of data highlighting how the pandemic has widened the wealth gap between the world's richest and poorest people. Now, on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the civil rights icon's legacy is front and center as the battle over voting rights grows in the nation's capital. The House passed the John Lewis voting rights bill last week, but it faces two major roadblocks in the Senate: Senators Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has promised to vote on the bill later this week. Ahead of this vote, activists, including some of King's family, are using today to channel MLK Jr. in hopes of convincing the Senate to pass the bill. NBC News reporter Gary Grumbach joins us from D.C. Hi, Gary. Good morning. So activists will march through D.C. later this morning. So tell us about their plans and the message today.
Good morning, Savannah. Yeah, what do they want? Voting rights. When do they want it? Well, ideally, they'd like it right now. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is seen widely as a day off for many people. Banks are closed. Schools are closed. The stock market is closed. But activists and organizers here that are going to be marching today say it's a day on for them. And in that spirit, they're going to be marching across this bridge. This is the Frederick Douglass Memorial Bridge here in Washington. And it's not really a march on Washington that they're doing today. It's more of a march in Washington and through Washington. They're going to be marching across this bridge onto Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and to a street aptly named Good Hope Road. And it's all in the name of voting rights. They want the bill that passed the House this past week to pass the Senate and to get to President Biden's desk. Now, what is in this bill? Broadly speaking, it's a national infrastructure to create a regular a national standard for how elections are run. It's also striking down hurdles in the name of election security and really reducing the influence of big money in politics. But of course, none of this can happen without the support of the White House and without the support of everybody in Congress when it comes to the Democratic side. But there are two roadblocks, as we mentioned: Senators Kyrsten Sinema and Senator Joe Manchin. Savannah?
So, Gary, let's talk a little bit more about that, because members of the King family were actually in Arizona. That's, of course, home of Senator Kyrsten Sinema this weekend, rallying for voting rights. So what's their message to her specifically, to Senator Sinema, especially coming after she spoke against the filibuster? And that's something that would help pass this bill, of course, only if all Democrats are on board. But what is their message here?
Yeah, this is not something that's just happening in Washington. The activists have been across the country this weekend, really making it clear they want voting rights done now, and they want to get it done as quickly as possible, especially as we come across this Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But none of it can happen without every Democratic vote because of the slim margins in the Senate. And so, as we've seen on a number of issues over the past year, they need everybody. But Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are really the roadblocks in all of this because of their stance on the filibuster change. Here's what Martin Luther King III had to say in a message to Kyrsten Sinema.
I was just greatly disappointed that you stand in the way and have the gall to not realize that what is being done in all of these states, it's about the filibuster, and yet every last one of these states that have passed these regressive laws have done it with all Republican legislators, not bipartisan. So that to me seems to be not a sufficient argument.
Now, a silver lining here, at least we know where Senator Kyrsten Sinema stands on this issue. In the past, she has only communicated with President Biden and with President Biden's staff, leaving some of her own colleagues to be unsure where she stands on some issues. Savannah?
Now, Gary, the Senate is back in session tomorrow to focus on voting rights, but at this point, it's unlikely to pass without the support of these two senators. If it were to not pass, what happens next in the fight for voting rights?
Yeah, well, if it doesn't, this is just yet another big blow for the Biden agenda. This was something that President Biden campaigned on, and he really made a promise to communities, especially the diverse communities that really helped put him over the top in the primary, saying, I will get voting rights done for you. And if he doesn't, that's a real problem for his future in terms of his political career here. But in terms of the activists and the organizers on the ground, the fight really continues. This is not something they have an appetite for giving up anytime soon. Here's what one representative had to say.
Clearly, we can also go back to the drawing table and revise those bills, but I'm not going to give up on this. Since 2013, I have introduced this bill in 4 successive Congresses. This is the first time I've done so without John Lewis. But I think that we have to invoke not only his memory, his legacy. So many of these senators walked across that bridge with John in my hometown, commemorating the events of Bloody Sunday. Now they have an opportunity to write their own history.
And organizers say that history can start this week, even tomorrow, if the Senate passes that John Lewis voting rights bill. Savannah?
All right, Gary Grumbach, thank you so much. And coming up, the big screen in need of a big boost. After the break on Morning News Now, the box office hits that industry officials hope will bring moviegoers back to the theaters. That's after the break. Welcome back. Now, it's been nearly 2 years since the first COVID case was reported in the U.S. And despite the rapid development of the vaccine, the Omicron and Delta variants are still crushing the healthcare system. All that has led to a phenomenon many of us are probably experiencing called COVID fatigue. NBC News correspondent Harry Smith takes a closer look at what it is and where we go from here.
Cases and hospitalizations soar to new records.
Staffing shortages, vaccine mandates,
upgrade our masks. If you didn't know better, you'd think we're in the middle of a pandemic.
I think it's hard to process what's actually happening right now, which is most people are going to get COVID.
Numbers are staggering. Deaths from COVID are nearing 2,000 a day. And yet, at last week's college championship football game, indoors, nary a mask. Almost 2 years of COVID have produced a side effect, COVID fatigue.
After a while, when you get that stress of day after day after day of hearing the news and seeing what's going on with your friends, you just start getting this fatigue that means that you get to the point where you're like, why care anymore? Why bother? Why do the things I need to do?
Similar, says Dr. John Torres, to something he's seen in his 30-plus years of active and reserve military service.
Does it bear any resemblance to battle fatigue?
You know, interestingly, it does, because you can see this in battle fatigue, that after a while, the stresses of battle can wear somebody down to the point where they can't do anything. We're seeing the same thing here in the pandemic, where people get to the point where they say, you know, enough's enough.
And for that, there is no vaccine, no booster, and it too is contagious, says organizational psychologist Adam Grant.
I think it's not only possible, it's likely. I think we have good evidence in social science that emotions are contagious. And so if lots of people are just ready to be done with this, right, that sends a pretty clear signal.
That voice inside us saying, I'm done.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things for a lot of people has been just to get a sense of momentum, right? It almost feels like the world is standing still and your life is frozen.
Like that frozen February morning in a movie we've watched 1,000,000 times.
And, it just feels like Groundhog Day keeps showing up and it won't quite go away.
I mean, really, Sonny and Cher every morning over and over and over again.
But lest you start to feel complacent about COVID, this advice.
It's worth looking back at all the effort you've already put into keeping yourself safe, right? So if you're just going to stop indoor masking now, why did you mask for nearly 2 years? And is it really that painful? Is it the worst thing on earth?
After all, what's the worst that could happen?
So it's a roll of the dice, essentially. You're gambling with your life.
And that is a bet you really don't want to make. Harry Smith, New York.
Now, the movie theater business has had a rough couple of years as venues fought to survive and production companies switched to streaming platforms to release films that could have been huge box office hits. But a string of new movies could bring some much-needed energy to the cinema. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson has more.
Like a big-name franchise remake, the box office is back. After COVID crashed the market 2 years ago, last year, theaters doubled their money from 2020. But there's still a lot of fear facing the bid. A major test, the first wide release of the year. The new Scream hits theaters across the country, and experts say it will tell us a lot about theater-going habits in 2022.
I think we're going to see this new Scream movie do better than expected, and that'll show
that when you have the right movie out there, people put their mask on, go to the movie theater, enjoy it, and big box office will be the result.
The new hope swoops in right after Spider-Man's big box office holiday swing. Still saving the day for theaters, with now close to a $700 million domestic haul and the first pandemic-era flick to break $1 billion worldwide.
Spider-Man: No Way Home might have been the most important movie of the last 2 decades for movie theaters. So it shows that moviegoers are motivated by the movies themselves and that demographics are playing a key role on who goes to movie theaters and who decides to stay home. It's very interesting right now.
The industry needed this. 88% of theaters are open and operating compared to pre-pandemic levels. In an era of COVID fears and widespread lockdowns, audiences traded crowded theaters for the couch. Facing incredible losses, studios made blockbusters like The Matrix Resurrections available to watch day and date at home alongside the theater. Muke Greidinger is CEO of the U.S.'s second largest theater chain.
The premiere of a big movie should be in the cinemas.
Most studios will go back to theater first, but the release window before a movie hits digital is now even shorter.
This can work out. Day and date releases are not good for the industry, not for us, and not for the studios.
Another industry fear, this year's noticeably empty red carpet.
And the Golden Globe goes to...
Honestly, who knows? With the Golden Globes not televised this year for ethical reasons and a slew of other ceremonies pushed back by the pandemic, Hollywood's hallowed hype machine is sputtering. The impact, leaving medium and small budget adult dramas to suffer without the prestige they would normally profit from.
Award shows in person that are televised definitely have an impact on movie-going behavior. Because if you see a film that you haven't really heard of until you watch the awards, and let's say a film wins a bunch of awards or is nominated, then you think, wow, I got to go see that movie.
Would you like to play a game?
For now, those big genre flicks are the only sure bet. Soon, we'll see if screaming through the pandemic can be anywhere as near lucrative as web slinging.
Our thanks to Steve Patterson for that report. And coming up, a listing you won't find on Zillow. An Italian villa furnished with valuable art will soon be up for auction. We'll give you a tour inside what could become the most expensive property in the world. You're watching Morning News Now. Welcome back. We have a fascinating story for you. Tomorrow in Rome, a historic villa filled with valuable art goes up for auction after a long family feud, and it could become the most expensive property ever sold. NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavanga got a tour from the seller, a Texan-born Italian princess.
In one of Rome's most exclusive streets, a stone's throw from the Spanish Steps, a house is up for sale. Its asking price, more than $500 million. Enough to make it the most expensive house ever sold. But Villa Aurora is not any house. Renaissance masters painted its walls. Galileo observed the skies from here. And on this site, historians believe Julius Caesar hosted Cleopatra. Hundreds of years of intrigue and drama right up to the present day.
There's so much history here that it's so important to all of us, to not just Italians, but the world. This is a very special home.
The woman ordered to put the property up for sale is Texan, who became a princess. Born Rita Carpenter, she says it was her destiny to live here.
My parents sent me here when I was 16, just out of high school. I had just graduated from high school. And I went to the Trevi Fountain. I was so taken with Rome. And I threw a coin in the Trevi Fountain and I said, please let me marry an Italian and live in Rome someday. It took many decades before that happened. But it came true. My wish came true.
After her first marriage to Democratic Congressman John Jenrette ended, it did come true. She found her Italian Prince Charming, who happened to be an actual prince. Rita and Prince Niccolò Boncompagni Ludovisi were married, making her a princess. But when he died in 2018, De Villa was at the heart of a legal battle with his 3 children from a previous marriage.
It's a very sad episode in this family's history, and it would make Nicola very sad.
The Italian courts have instructed the princess to sell the proceeds divided. The asking price at auction is $532 million, far higher than the previous record of $361 million for a Hong Kong apartment complex. So what does $500 million buy you? Well, among the artistic treasure is a drawing by Picasso, a statue attributed to Michelangelo, and best of all, the only known ceiling painting in the world by Caravaggio, that alone valued at almost $400 million. And as the princess prepares to say goodbye, she hopes the buyer loves the house as much as her.
I hope whomever buys it has deep pockets and that they can restore it to its former glory, and that they would respect the history that, that has evolved here over the past 500 years. And it's a precious place to me.
Claudio Lavanga, NBC News, Rome.
We told you it was fascinating. Just a treasure chest.
Is it on Zillow?
Yeah. It's not. No. I don't think they go that high.
That was your Zillow.
$500 million.
Right,
that's going to be a no.
No kidding. Very cool. All right. That does it for this hour of morning news now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.